would say, get away from your books and your textbooks. Go out to your state parks or any park of your choice and learn the crafts and what's going on out there. I mean, when I took training at the Indian Museum as well as Sutter's Fort, I found out how to use a loom, how to set up a loom, how to do all the intricate work. I mean, it's 8 to 10 hours to set up a loom. This one here had 4 frames to it so that you could have a varied pattern, and it was like 4 feet across and 6 feet deep. But for every thread that you had coming across, you had to go through all these little needles and pins from the back, so that we had 300 strings across. You had to go through all 300, and that was very, but you also learned how to churn butter and add some additives to it over at the fort. Everything was supposed to taste like saltine crackers without the salt. It was supposed to be bland. And they said you could use anything within the fort here to highlight the butter. So we planted some strawberries, and we harvested the strawberries, and we took the strawberries and mixed it in with the cream as we were churning it, and then added some sugar. And boy, you had a dessert spread that wouldn't quit, along with that oven bread that came out. The only problem was with the bread, you would start at 6:30 in the morning cutting wood, building up your beehive oven, and then by the time it got up to a full blast roaring fire, which would be anywhere from 8 to 1100 degrees Fahrenheit inside. I had a thermometer once that I put in. Then after you rake out the coals, then you find out that you got to let the oven cool down to a certain level, and the certain level is just right when you can take cornmeal and throw it in, and it just doesn't go like flash powder, poof. So when the cornmeal goes in and settles down to the point that it don't poof, then the temperature is just right. And at that point, I put the oven thermometer in, found out it was 340 degrees. Then you take your bread that's been raising out in the sun, throw it in. Mind you, there's no pans. So you get all that black ash that's on the bottom of the oven, on the bottom of your bread. Put a wet rag around the door, close it. 20 minutes later, you go in there and you scoop it up, and you have nice big loaves of bread averaging 2 feet across and about 6 inches thick. And by this time, you say it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The park closes at 5. You had enough butter and bread to feed an army, but the crowds were gone by that time. Well, it would be traits that people no longer know that even exist, as far as being a cooper and making barrels, wooden barrels. I mean, people today, they go to maybe a planting store or a garden supply store, and they find the wine barrels that are cut in half. But when they look at it, they said, I wonder what assembly line they made these on. And then you realize that it's not an assembly line process. It's something where each individual one is made by hand. And it goes into a lot of work. And so the greatest disgrace is when you cut the barrel in half. Think of all the work and labor that's gone. But you also, too, I took training at the Indian Museum, and you find out that how people lived on the area of Sacramento here prior to the white man coming. And it's really interesting. I mean, they take acorn shells and they harvest them, and then they find out if you eat an acorn shell, unless it's buried in a mud bank, for instance, to leach out the tannic acid, it's very tart and very unpalatable. However, you put it in mud bank for a couple of weeks and let it leach out the tannic acid, then you can take the stuff and you put it in a basket that you've woven, and you add a little water to it. And then in order to cook it, because the basket will burn, you take a rock that you have on a hot fire and you drop the rock in with the mush, and then you turn it around with your hand and toss it, and then toss the rock out, and by that time the mush is cooked and it's something that you can eat. Sounds very unpalatable, but at the same time, I guess it kept them alive. Then comes the hunting. You have what they call a roundhouse. Totally unrelated to railroad technology, but it was a pit dug into the ground about 20 feet across, built with twigs and branches, some of them so thick that they were approaching beams. And then when you get through doing this, then you would take leaves and bark and lay on top of it, And then
Hello,
you'd make a
Tom.
little center hole in the top about 8 inches across to let the heat and the smoke out. And the reason for this was is so that when you went in there, you would go in there and sweat off all your body odors, so that when you went out hunting, basically in the buff with hardly nothing on, the animals couldn't smell your scent and run away. But to give you an idea how the state likes to operate, they told us when we built this roundhouse that we had to have a concrete foundation with an electric light socket inside. We built the entire thing, and when you get inside, you can see the concrete foundation totally untouched by the branches. You go up to Fort Bragg, Fort Ross, that area, and you go into the chapel at Fort Ross up there. Look up inside the chapel, and you'll see an electric light socket. What purpose does it serve? Oh, it meets code. They don't think about they didn't have code when they built the chapel. But there's so many things that are screwy, but you can learn these things by going out. I mean, I'm sure that most textbooks today are not going to go into the detail that you'll find in your various state parks.